from 2 days ago. It's a common theme in self-help books that you can't just change your actions. Your willpower isn't strong enough to keep you doing the right thing all the time. Instead, you have to change yourself into being the kind of person who does the right thing. Yesterday, you designed an intentional you. The next step is to become that person. Unfortunately, this is a case where the design work is much more difficult than the implementation. In a very real sense, you are about to embark on your own Easter story. Before you can be the person you want to be, you have to let the person you are die. Depending on how big and how obvious the changes that you're about to make are, there are several drags that will try to hold you back. The first obstacle you'll have to overcome is habit. There are many books on how hard habits are to break, and they are hard to break. But, especially if you're trying to replace the habit instead of just overcome the habit, it totally can be done. You have to be understanding but firm with yourself regarding this. You're going to lapse back into your old ways. You're going to be doing something and then find yourself doing things the old way. Accept this, but when you find yourself doing things the old way, change it immediately. If you're trying to change a habit of unhealthy eating, and you notice halfway through a candy bar that your old habits have taken over, you owe it to your new self not to finish the candy bar and then try again. Your new self doesn't do that. You're not being fair to your new vision of yourself if you allow your old self that much influence. That person is dead, let them go. Equally hindering, and sometimes more so, is the collective power that society has on you. All the people you know, they think they know you. They think you're the old you. As you change, you're going to have to overcome that social drag pulling you back to being that person. Your friends and family have a vision of who you are, and they're going to be resistant to change. This isn't because they don't love you. This isn't because they don't care for you. This is because it's hard to change, and it's going to be hard for them to change how they view you. Here, it will help some if you tell them what you're doing. Then, at least they understand that when you're acting in a way that is not the way they expect you to be acting, they know why you're acting that way. The downside to this plan is that you have to have a conversation where you tell them, I don't like the person I've been and I'm going to become a new person. It's hard enough to have this conversation with yourself. It's much harder to have this conversation in words with somebody else. One of the themes in John Green's Paper Towns is the power of leaving. There's a certain freedom that comes with leaving the place that you knew and the people who you knew and the world where you felt comfortable. That freedom is an opportunity to become someone new without the social drag pulling you back. But one way or another, you have to defeat that social drag. There are two ways to affect large-scale change. You can do it one thing at a time, or you can tear the whole thing down and build the whole thing back up. Of course, you can do it in increments thereof. It's a sliding scale. It's not all this thing or all this thing. The state of cleared out and not yet rebuilt is very uncomfortable. It's a mess, and the space is largely unusable. Therefore, people choose to change things in small increments to minimize the disruption on your life. If you think of this as remodeling a house, you can change things in pretty much whatever increments you can think of. On one extreme, you can level the house and rebuild the whole thing. On the other extreme, you can change this one shelf and move it and change the next shelf. As is often the case, both extremes are crazy. But maybe you're comfortable working with one room at a time, whereas somebody else might be comfortable working with 4 or 5 rooms at a time. The advantage to changing things with minimal tumult is that it leaves the rest of your world livable while you're making those small changes. But it takes a lot longer to finish anything doing it that way. That's the balance. Minimize discomfort at the cost of duration, or you live with a lot of mess, but for a relatively short period of time. And you have a pretty big remodeling project in front of you here. Doing this one shelf at a time is going to take you forever, and perhaps you'll never get where you want to be. It's probably better for everyone if you just make the big change and accept all that discomfort at once. The other advantage of this approach is then you get to spend a lot more time as the person who you want to be. This is very much a case of the slight edge. It's easy to be the new you. It's easy to lapse into the old you. Success depends on making the right decision more often than not. Until tomorrow, keep smiling.